right, ready to go? All right, thank you. There's a bunch of WLC stuff up there, like stickers and pens, and also information about. I don't want to take any of it back. All right, so I'll remind you at the end of the session to grab stuff. I see that MLC recruiters out there. If you have any inkling about being a pastor or a teacher, you should consider them first. It's a good gig. When you're done, they just give you a job. You don't even have to have a resume. And you'll be loved like you won't be loved in any other job. If being a pastor or a teacher maybe is not what you're thinking, check this out. There's a pathway at WLC for just about everything. From forensic science to medicine to anything in business. So check us out and take as much stuff as you want. I'm hoping not to take any of it home, all right? I'll try to remind you at the end of our session. All right. How's the discussions? Anybody want to share anything? How about the teachers? Yeah? Any of the teachers say, like, this was a really good discussion we had. Let's do maybe one or two of those. Any of the... It's always fun to ask the teacher something, isn't it, huh? Yeah? Put them on the spot for a little bit. Yeah.
I could just tell, oh, wow. All right, I could just tell that people were thinking deeply about it. And I heard a couple stories of these teenagers who have already had conversations, apologetic conversations. They might not have had that exact vocabulary for it yet, but they were talking to friends and wrestling with these problems and issues and conversations. And I just really appreciated hearing their evangelism efforts.
Any other teacher have something that they thought was worthwhile to share? You know what the teachers complain about? When they ask a question and nobody answers it. Yeah? Oh, okay. Here he goes. Yes, sir.
Our group talked about how when you mentioned, do we really reflect on how famous Jesus was back in his day? And we were talking about how when Jesus withdraws to Tyre and Sidon, and the Canaanite woman knows who he is, and he's so far away, they didn't have photographs back then or anything like that, but she knows who he is. And so do we really understand how famous he was? And then he gets back to Jerusalem for Palm Sunday, and look what happens. We had a nice discussion about that.
All of Jerusalem was astir, yeah. Remember when he flipped over the money changers table in the temple? I don't think we have an equivalent of that. The closest thing I can think of is like the State of the Union address when everybody used to watch that, and just someone came in and just knocked everything over. Like you would remember that guy. Yeah. So any kind of funny business with the body seems to be unthinkable. Yeah. One last one. Any teacher had something that they thought was worth sharing? Yeah. I should call on them by name. Put them on the spot like they do to you. Yeah. All good? All right, we can move on. Anybody? Okay. William James, the great philosopher, said there's two kinds of people. There's tough-minded and there's tender-hearted. And what he meant by that is that there are people who think logically, like scientists, lawyers, accountants, and then there are people who don't think always so logically, but have a different path to truth in a way. So your artists, your musicians, that kind of stuff. Let me put it real simply. There's a bit of a spectrum here, and it's to be an artist or to be an accountant, and you're somewhere. Yeah. If you're the accountant size, right? You like math, you like that. What we did this morning, probably whether you agreed with it or not, hit home. Point one, point two, what's the evidence? Yeah. But if you're more artistic person, you're thinking that doesn't maybe jive with you, right? And so you have to think about that there is apologetics not just for the tough-minded, the scientist, the lawyer type, but also for the tender-hearted. And this midsection, this session number 2, I know it says 3 on the top of page 6, that's a mistake. Session number 2 is going to be more for the tender-hearted. And let me start with the idea of beauty. Would you agree or disagree that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Has everybody heard that phrase, beauty is in the eye of the beholder? Honestly, raise your hand if you believe that's true. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Be honest. You believe that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. What do you mean that beauty is in the eye of the beholder? Yes, Mr. Ash. Beauty is different for everybody. And so what I think is beautiful means and what you think is beautiful may be something completely different, correct? Okay, yeah, all right. I'm going to try to convince you that that's not true. And that beauty actually is there's an objective standard, and I can say that's beautiful and that's ugly. And that, I'm willing to bet, rubs you the wrong way, because you're like, who's this guy who thinks he is to judge what is beauty and what is ugliness? But I'm going to make the case that my position actually is the most inclusive position, and yours is exclusive, if you think beauty is in the eye of the beholder. You ready? Let's see if I can convince you. I don't know if I will or not, but I'm going to have fun trying. All right. If beauty is in the eye of the beholder, if it's located here, where is it not located? In the thing I'm looking at. That means that beauty for that object or that person or that sound or whatever does not exist. The beauty only exists in my eye, it doesn't exist out there. Notice how close we are to say that truth is in the mind of the thinker, it's not actually out there. Let me put it a different way. I got 3 daughters, and let's imagine one of them comes home from like 8th grade, they're older now, but in 8th grade and comes home crying. I say, what's wrong, dear? And she says, the boys called me ugly today. What am I supposed to say? Well, truth's in the eye of the beholder, dear. At least your dad thinks you're beautiful. That would make me a really bad father. What am I supposed to say? I'm supposed to say, you are beautiful, and those boys are idiots. But once I say, you are beautiful, I'm making a statement of faith. I think you're better, Dad. Okay, I'm like, I don't know. Am I going to be arrested here? You're very aware. Did it clicked off? Went to lunch? Okay. All right. I was in the middle of it. I was cooking, wasn't I? And now I got to start over. I was eating and not leaving crumbs. Is that the new thing we say? All right. Okay. All right. All right. Where was I? All right. Hey, once I say to my daughter, you are beautiful, I'm not making a subjective sentence. I didn't say I think you're beautiful. I said you are beautiful, and that is an objective sentence, and that has to be based on some sort of objectivity. Okay? All right. Now I'm gonna tell you a story that I'm not proud of, but it's funny. All right? Hey, you remember COVID? That thing? Yeah. At Wisconsin Lutheran College, we remained open that following fall. Remember, it came in spring, and then you guys. How old were you guys when you were? 17. Okay. And up. Middle school, yeah? Okay. So you remember this. And we came back in the fall, all spread out, and everybody was wearing masks, but we remained open. And I teach a bunch of freshmen. And I taught in all my classes I taught in our theater, so they're all spread out. And so they're a little bit distant, and I can only see their eyes, I can't see their faces. And I remember thinking, this is a really good-looking class. This is really like good-looking class. Because I could only see their eyes, and you have a hard time finding an ugly pair of eyes. You ever notice that? All eyes are beautiful. But I also realized something when they came back as sophomores. When they came back as sophomores, I'm like, ugh, that's disappointing. You know, I'm not proud of it, but it's true. All right. What did I do when they had their mask on? I filled in the face. I filled in the face. And I didn't fill it in with missing teeth or crooked smiles. I filled it in according to, and I don't think it was because it wasn't because of like my preference, because you could see enough of their face that it wouldn't have been about preference, that you just filled it in an orderly fashion. There was a study years ago, and it's worth something. I don't think it's a game changer too much, but this is before like dating apps. This is before phones and stuff. But they put people in front of computers, and they would put people's faces on there, and they had to go attractive or not, swipe left or right. And when they did that, one of the conclusions was that it had nothing to do with skin tone. It had nothing to do with eye color. It had nothing to do even with like cheekbone structure or whatever, as much as this. People are attracted to symmetry. Yeah, which you could totally understand, right? This is not, I had my eyes wide. There's something about order that gives us a certain amount of attraction and even beauty to it. I think that's fascinating. I think that's fascinating. I think that you should be able to say something's ugly or beautiful in a standard way. Now, there's a difference between preference and the idea of beauty and ugliness. I may prefer the color blue over the color yellow, but do I have a right to say that blue is beautiful and yellow is ugly? I don't. Now, notice what I did here is I'm saying that even though I don't prefer something, doesn't mean that it's ugly. So I eliminate this as beautiful to me and ugly to me. No, I just prefer it. And that's actually more exclusive, because then I'm forced to say, maybe yellow has something. Even though I don't prefer it, yellow still's got something going on. Yeah. I may like a painting of a snow-capped mountain range. Maybe you had a bad experience skiing and that triggers you, so you're not going to put that up in your living room someday. But you can still say, even though I don't prefer it, that that's beautiful. By the way, I think this is one of the fundamental differences between art and decoration. Yeah? Okay. Now, I still haven't really answered the question, though. On what basis can we judge what is beautiful and what is ugly? I sort of hinted at this idea of order, and I think there's some truth to that. By the way, I think that you can judge your emotions correctly or incorrectly as well. Like, we've sort of left this open, like, people mourn in different ways and they rejoice in different ways, and it's all just very subjective. Okay, there's some differences. There's differences culturally, there's difference from individual to individual. But I think we should be able to judge our emotions correctly or incorrectly, as right or wrong. And I'll give you a couple examples. All right. Now let's imagine I don't have girls, but I have boys. I don't, but let's imagine I got a boy. He's 3 or 4 years old. And I put him to bed in this little race car, little bed, and I kiss him goodnight, and I say, Jesus loves you, buddy. And then I go out into the living room, and my wife has queued up a movie. It's a mob movie, you know, one with a lot of violence. Yeah? Okay. You know, a mobster flick, yeah. And at a particularly violent place in the movie, like this violent death and blood and gore or whatever, I see Junior's got up. And he's in the hallway, and he's looking at the TV. And I jump up thinking, oh, this kid's going to have nightmares for weeks. I'm probably going to have to take him to therapy. And as I'm walking to him, he points at the television and says, ha, 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 ha. Now I know I have to take him to therapy because I'm living with a psychopath, yeah? I can rightly say that that was the incorrect and even immoral reaction to that thing. If you laugh at somebody else's pain, that's not just about, well, this is what I kind of like, you know. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and I can just do it. No, I think that's incorrect, right? And if you can't find joy and love for other people, that's a problem too, right? Imagine going to a museum, you know, like the ones with the big murals, and you're in a room like this, and there's two paintings by the same artist, same color palette, same amount of talent and technique, and you're sitting there pretending like you know what art is, you know? And this guy next to you is like, he's like, I don't know. I don't like that one. I like this one. And they look the same. But one is a painting of a famous, some sort of famous heroic character, I don't know, saving some damsel in distress. I don't know. And the other one's a brutal mugging of a grandmother. And the guy's like, I don't know, I'm just attracted to this one and not that one. What do? Well, you go to the next room really quickly, right? Yeah? I think we can judge those things by a strain of objectivity versus subjectivity. So now I'm getting closer. I think I'm getting closer. And I think here's where the payoff's going to come. I think that beauty is tied up with morality in a very profound way. And you're like, that doesn't make any sense. But you actually speak that way. When you hear about a heinous racist act, you don't just say, that's wrong. You say, that's ugly. What did you mean? That the person who committed that heinous racist act wasn't attractive? Ugly and immorality, they go together. And when an old sweet lady sees a young family pushing a stroller with a baby, she says, that's so beautiful. She doesn't mean that those people are attractive. She means the whole thing's beautiful. The whole thing's beautiful. It's wholesome. It's whole, by the way. The Hebrew word for wholesome is one of them is shalom, peace, the way it's supposed to be, right? There's something beautiful about order and the way it's supposed to be. And beauty and morality are tied together, and disorder and ugliness, right? Those are the things that are not supposed to be. There's a reason why we tend to like a happy ending at the end of a movie. Now, you may be asking, but then why did you watch that mob flick? Why are we attracted to a car crash or bad news or horror movies or whatever? Precisely because you know that there's a right and a wrong. Because if there was no right and wrong, if there was no beauty and ugliness, then that horror movie wouldn't be a horror movie. Yeah? Precisely know that there are guardrails around this, and you know that there's a way there's supposed to be, and there's a way it's not supposed to be. And you have to ask yourself the question, where does that come from? Where does it come from that you know instinctively right and wrong, that you look at that and are attracted to that, and you're sort of looking at that thing that's evil and ugly or whatever, and you're like, I don't think I'm supposed to look at it, but I do kind of like looking at it. Why is that? And by the way, why is this universal? Let me go down a different path just for a second. I'll bring it back. Don't let anybody tell you that there's different moralities in the world. I don't think that's sociologically a tenable position. And here's why. Because it's wrong to punch people in the face for no reason in every corner of the earth and every time. It just is. What a remarkable thing it would be that all of the different cultures and all of the different times all came up with pretty much the same morality on them by themselves. I don't think that you can argue that could have happened by natural means. Well, the Bible's pretty clear about it, right? By saying there's a law written in everybody's heart. Now, there's different emphases in ethics from place to place and time to time, but the basics are basically the same. Can I give you one difference, just because I think it's fun? You guys still use like Scantron sheets where you fill in the bubbles? Yeah. If you had a 100-question Scantron sheet and you hand it to your professor, and he noticed or she noticed that like out of the first 20, 10 of them weren't answered, what would your teacher do? Give it back to you and say, fill in the whole text. And if you said, but I didn't know the answers, they would say, we'll make an educated guess. Almost as if you were immoral for not trying hard. In other cultures, that's considered cheating. If I guess, then I get the answer right, that's dishonest, right? So notice that honesty is still important, hard work's still important, it's just that we emphasize different things. Okay, all right. So now let's think about morality and beauty, and let's put a bow on this a little bit. As you grow older, you will say, that's a beautiful thing. And more you'll say, because it was righteous, and it was loving. And I think you have to understand, and I think you'll come to this conclusion if you're honest, or at least think that this is a plausibility, that God wrote certain things in my heart. He gave me a sense of right and wrong. He gave me a sense of beauty, and he wrote eternity in my heart. I instinctively understand that I'm important and that I was made for something more, contemplation and wonderment. And all of these things, as all of the ancient culture said, drives me to questions about the divine. So here's the payoff. Beauty has a connection to the divine. And I think the artist in this room and the musicians in this room are maybe thinking, yeah, I think there's something to that. Okay. I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit, just to kind of get a preview. And yet, you wear crosses with a dead body around your neck. Yeah. And we call that horrific Friday good. Here's where the gospel then comes in. That God turns the ugly into beauty. So the apologetic thing is the discussion about, like, let's talk about beauty, man. Let's think about this. There's something divine about this. This is not just happenstance. There's something going on here, man. You know? And then I think you can eventually get to the cross there and say, but there's ugliness in this world, and God deemed to come in and to be shamed by the cross and to be ugly so you could be beautiful. Right? Okay. All right. Now the next thing is that we need to talk about is the problem of evil. Remember, I said that this is a problem that needs to be solved. Let me run through the problem of evil real quick with you. I skipped over one thing, the discussion question, right? Same kind of question as we had last time. How might this conversation be a good way to talk about your faith? So you can kind of contemplate that in preparation for your next discussion breakout. Okay, problem of evil. How could there be an all-loving God, an all-powerful God, and a world of evil? God, the Bible says he is all-powerful and says God is all-loving, so how could there be evil in the world? Okay, so there's three typical answers. One is that, well, maybe God's not all-powerful. Sometimes he wins, sometimes the devil wins, and maybe God. Good luck. The next answer is actually even worse. God's not all-loving. He doesn't even care. So you live, you die, good luck. The third answer is there is no God. You live, you die, good luck. It's just the way it is. Eventually, you're just going to die. So there it is. Right? By the way, let's go down a tangent real quick. Ready? I just said something previous that Solomon said in Ecclesiastes that eternity is written on our heart. And you're like, this is a dumb throwaway phrase. Think about this. I don't think any person lives as if they only have 80, 90, 100 years. Even if they deny that, they live as if their soul is going to be eternal, which is how most thinkers think. All right. And here's why I know that. Because once again, if you only had 80, 90, 100 years to deal with here, I think you would be so burdened with all of your decisions that you would not be able to function in this world. And here's what I mean. There are decisions that you're going to all have to make in a short amount of time, like where to go to college. That is going to affect you at least for a year or 4 years, and really, this decision is going to affect you for the rest of your life. When you buy a house, that decision is going to affect you for at least 30 years. Who you date. If you make that bad choice or not. If you move here or there, is going to have effect for your life. Your purchase of a house is going to affect, at the very least, 30% of your life, and that's if you live 100 years. Can you imagine the pressure? Can you imagine the pressure of only having 80, 90, 100 years? Think about every moment you waste. If you only had 100 years, you would not waste those moments. And you would be so petrified about making the wrong decision that I think you would be handicapped from actually living. But you don't. You live as instinctively live as if there was more. You instinctively live as if you are important. Yeah? All right. Now, let me think about this then. That means that this problem of evil is the kind of the game changer. Because if all there is this world, and this world is evil, I'm not sure what we're doing here. I'm not sure what you're doing sitting here. I think you should just get out there and get as much as you can before you die, right? So this is sort of kind of where the rubber hits the road in apologetics, and that is, how could God allow fill in the blank? All right, I'm going to focus now. You ready? That was all over the map. All right. I told you that there's three options. God is not all powerful, God is not all loving, or there is no God. Now I'm going to give you a fourth option, and I'm going to do it through the story of Job. You remember Job? Job had nothing. Actually, he had everything, and then everything was taken from him. Job had the family, the reputation, the big ranch, he had the wealth, he had all those things. And then those things were taken away. Well, what's the most interesting thing about Job to me is the first chapter, where God and the devil talk. Is that, right away you're like, what are you talking about? Yeah? And God has his angels line up, right? I don't know why, but he's got his angels lined up. And the devil, a fallen angel, lines up with them. And this is not in the text, but this is how I've always imagined it. I've imagined the devil kind of having that grin on his face as he lines up on the end. As if to say to God, ain't nobody love you down here. Have you looked down there? They're a mess. War after war after war. Ain't nobody love you. This is where God says, have you considered my servant Job? He is right. He is righteous by faith. He is righteous. And the devil seems to say, well, of course he loves you. Look at all the stuff that he has. If you let me at him, he'll curse you and die. And this is the most fascinating part. What is God's answer to that request? Go ahead. In fact, he gives permission to the devil twice to attack Job. You have to come to terms with this in your life, that not only will God allow you, he'll send you. Don't let God off the hook. You ever heard this phrase, when God shuts a door and he opens up a window? Yeah? You ever heard that? Yeah, don't ever say it. You don't know what God's doing with the doors and the windows. Yeah? In fact, the only story with doors and windows is when Thomas was hiding behind locked doors and shut windows, and they were shut and locked purposely so that Thomas was in a corner. He had nowhere to go but to Jesus when Jesus appears and says, touch me. Sometimes God puts you into a corner with no way out, precisely so you stop believing in yourself and you start trusting in him. All right, back to the story. I think this is fascinating that God allowed the devil to go after Job, and so you know the story. He took his family, he took his wealth, he took his health. But he was not allowed to take, eventually not allowed to take Job's life. Okay, now, would you agree that faith in Jesus is kind of the whole deal? That's the goal. Yes? Yeah, you've been in the church long enough, in school long enough to know that faith in Jesus is the whole thing. By the way, the opposite of faith in Jesus is not unbelief. That's a misnomer. When we talk about unbelief, that's shorthand for somebody who believes in something else but Christ. Everybody believes. The atheist believes. You ever thought about that? The atheist believes. Of course he does. He trusts something, usually himself, or his eyes, or his senses, or his teachers. You always have to trust something, because you don't have all the information, because you're not God. You always have to trust. Yeah? So if the goal is trust in Jesus, and the opposite is trust in anything else, usually ourselves, it seems to me that once in a while God has to smack us on the back of the head so that we don't trust in ourselves, or in the government, or the political party, or the politician, or the doctors for our eternity, but actually trust in him. This is a game changer, and I'm going to tell you why in a bit. Because this gives meaning to suffering in a world that does not allow meaning to suffering anymore, to dire consequences. Back to the Job story, right? So the devil goes out, and he attacks Job, and Job does not curse God and die, but rather writes poetry that we still sing today. I know that my Redeemer lives, and in the end I'll stand upon the earth. Right? In my flesh, he says, his flesh that was melting off because of that leprosy, that skin disease. In my flesh, I will see my God. Right? Now, I'm not saying that God and the devil have a monthly staff meeting, but let's say they still discuss things. And the devil comes up to God, says, these people are a mess. Have you seen them down there? They are a mess down there. Ain't nobody like you down there. And God's like, have you considered my servants at Michigan Lutheran Seminary? And the devil's like, of course they love you. How spoiled they are. iPhone in every pocket, Nikes on every foot. If you let me at them, they'll curse you and die. So maybe they just open up the yearbook and they start with Anderson. And God says, she's not ready. I'm not allowed to touch her. For him, everything but his body. For her, you can take the financials, but don't touch the body. For him, he's ready to come home. And each time God allows that, he allows just enough suffering in your life so that it benefits you. Even if you can't understand it in the moment, that it benefits you for the long run. I don't know how, I don't know why, but I have this promise that that's exactly what he does. And for no other reason. I don't know why God gave me cancer. I had cancer a decade ago. I don't know why, I can't say why he gave it to me, but maybe it was no other reason than he said, you need me, dude. And I'm not going to let you get too arrogant in yourself, because I know what the consequences are, because you think you're not going to need me, and then you're going to lose faith in me. Right? Yeah? Okay. And so off the devil goes, with God's permission, into your life. And that's a chilling thing to think about. But it's actually quite comforting. By the way, don't you think the devil knows what I know? Like, he's read the same Bible, right? Like, so why does he, I think he's getting tricked by God. Like, Martin Luther talks about, like, that God hiding behind the mask of the devil. The devil ends up doing God's work. And you're like, isn't the devil smart enough? I've always pictured the devil as the perpetual buyer of lottery tickets. He just can't help himself. He just can't help himself, even though he knows in the long run he's going to lose. Because you're the prize. You're the prize. You ever thought about that? There's a great cosmic battle going on between St. Michael, the archangel, and Satan, between Christ, between good and evil, all of this stuff, and you're the prize. They're fighting over you. They're not fighting over money. They're fighting over you. You're the prize. You're the prize. And if you could see behind me and I could see behind you, you would see demons and angels fighting for you. Fighting for you. Now, what does this have to do with apologetics? Because this is the most important question that perennially is asked. How do you deal with evil in this world? Yeah? How do you deal with evil in this world? On the next page, we have this thing called the theology of glory and the theology of the cross. And I'm going to say Christianity. And in particular, Lutheranism has worked this out. has a unique way of thinking this answer. So by the way, I forgot. My fourth one, God is in control of evil. God is in control of evil. That would be the one-line answer. All right. Now, I'm going to make this hopefully applicable to you, specifically people your age. The ancient people did not commit suicide at the same level as we do. Nor did they do it for the same reasons as we collectively do. They did it for so-called honorable reasons, right? Like I'm going to follow my sword rather than be taken by the enemy or whatever. I think that's silly. I think it doesn't respect life. But it wasn't because of desperation. No doubt there were people who were desperate, so desperate that they took their own life throughout history, and there was mental illness and all of this. But it is a phenomenon that suicides are higher in the modern period, even though we have morphine and indoor plumbing and clean water. And I think that's worthy of a discussion. And I think there is two answers, and they're related. The first one is the ancients had meaning for suffering. It was almost always the wrong meaning, but it was meaning. So, why does my little village in the south of France in 1340 whatever have the plague? I'm like, well, of course, obviously, God's angry at us. We should burn the witches. It was the wrong answer, but at least it gave the context and a meaning to their suffering. It took a while for them to realize, maybe don't throw your chamber pot out into the street. You got a rat problem, I mean, that's a problem. When you fast forward to the modern period, what I mean by modern period is after the Renaissance and Reformation up until 2000. That's what we call the modern period. Think Industrial Revolution, Information Revolution, Scientific Revolution, the rise of Marxism, the rise of capitalism, all this kind of stuff. Very modern. In the modern philosophy, there was no meaning to suffering. Everything was about progress and getting better, and God was either eliminated from the thought process or sort of put into a corner. Or better yet, he was in heaven and there he stayed. It was a different way of thinking. And there was no purpose to suffering, except maybe in sort of an evolutionary way, you touch the hot stove once and then you learn. I suppose there's purpose there. But in an evolutionary mindset, there cannot be purpose, it's all randomness. So this idea of progress and this idea of randomness came together, and people stopped believing that there could be a God who would interact with this world, that there was evil that could interact with this world. And so pain and suffering had to be eliminated, and they would be eliminated by one of the three P's: a psychology, a pain, or a policy. Either governmental sort of policy would fix our problems, or pain management, medicine, or psychology therapy. Yeah? This was the promise of modernity, and you're too young to know this. And I'm just old enough to know this. That back in the day, people were very optimistic that science would fix all of our problems. There was literally in America optimist clubs that my grandparents' generation go to. Can you imagine going to a club just to be optimistic? No. You're much more pessimistic than previous generations. And here's why. Because the promise of eliminating pain that we really thought we could attain has not only not been fulfilled, it has caused even more problems. I'm glad that we have indoor plumbing and morphine and stuff like that, believe me, but that comes with environmental damage, it comes with poor labor practices, and it comes with opioid addictions. Okay? So now, here's the payoff, you ready? If life is to have meaning, and 51% of life is suffering, and that's on a good day in Saginaw, let alone a bad day in Haiti. my suffering has to have meaning. But if I eliminate God, and I eliminate the idea of right and wrong and good and evil, then my suffering doesn't have meaning. And then it's real easy to take the next step and say, why bother? And that's why we commit suicide at a higher rate than the ancients do, because we don't have a meaning for suffering. It's just random crap. Yeah? This is a fundamental philosophical change that your generation has to deal with, and it's costing lives. The second reason why I think people give up is they don't have a story. Ready for a book recommendation? Write this down. Another seminary, MLS seminary alum, Luke Thompson, wrote a book, Your Life Has Meaning. You should buy it. And he talked about this study in Canada that there were some sociologists that noticed that there were high suicide rates in some tribes of First Nations. That's what Canada calls natives, First Nations. And in other tribes, there were no suicides, much lower than the average. So here's the Canadian average. Some tribes had like 0. And then some had like 30 times the rate. We got to study this. And they found out that the tribes that still told their ancient stories had 0 suicides, and the ones that didn't tell their ancient stories had skyrocketed rates of suicide. If you don't belong to a story, then you don't belong. Do you see the problem? May I suggest, dear atheist, skeptical friend that's suffering and I'm having a conversation with, that Christianity profoundly, like no other religion or philosophy, gives, I think, a thorough understanding of suffering and pain, but also a story. Let's talk story just for a second. This is fascinating. By the way, the story doesn't have to be true, it just needs to be strong. The strong story gives you meaning, it gives you ethics, it gives you a sense of belonging. Part of our problem in America is we don't have a collective story anymore. When I was your age, we had a collective story. Communism bad, America good. And that was enough for us to like kind of hold it together. Didn't have to be true. Just needed to be strong. The great Greek myths, those are strong stories. I don't think all the Greeks actually believed that they were real. That was not the point. They were strong stories. They kept us together collectively. Here's the beautiful thing about Christianity, is that it does all the things that myths do. But it happens to be true. A myth gives you a strong story, a belonging, an ethic, something to hold on to. The real story, right, is reality. Christianity does both. Okay, you ready? Let's do theology of glory and the theology of the cross. All right. There are two stories, glory story and a cross story. I want you to think about it this way. Think about looking at the world through lenses, through glory or through the cross. All right, ready? I'm going to give you definitions and you can write it. The theologian of glory believes with his eyeballs. The theologian of glory believes with his eyeballs. The theologian of the cross believes with her eardrums. The theologian of glory believes with his eyeballs. Where's your thing, man? What happened? You lost it? What grade are you in? You're a senior and you lost your paper? Oh my gosh. All right. I think this, I love it. Shame him. Publicly shame him by walking over there. I bet he needs a pencil too. I bet he needs a pencil too. Do you need a pencil? Yeah, you know, he doesn't have a pencil either. Not writing stuff down. You thought you were just getting a pass through to talk? I teach, man. I know how to call you out. Yeah, all right. Here, dummy. Here, dummy. There you go. All right. What do I mean that a theologian of glory believes with eyeballs. What I mean by that is, I take in the empirical evidence. Empirical is sense evidence. I see, hear, touch, taste, and smell. Yep, I take in the information, and then I make rational conclusions. So I would put under it the theologian of glory. I gather the evidence and I make rational conclusions. The theologian of the cross, who's believing with eardrums, says, I go with what God says. I listen to God's word, and I go with what God's word says. And even if that goes against what my senses and my reasons say. Now, let's just stop there for a second. Let me play with that for a little bit. Okay, now, if I am healthy and successful, this is a very modern way of thinking. Remember the modern philosophy. If I'm healthy and successful, according to the world's standards, it's a rational conclusion to believe that God loves me. Right? And if I've been knocked around in this world for whatever reason, I can come to the rational conclusion that God hates me. If I do good deeds, then that's good. And if bad things happen to me, that's bad. Yeah? This is very rational. This is all great. And it's how you should look at the world, but not how you should look at love or your relationship with God. Right? Okay. So the theologian of glory, maybe write this down, thinks that good is always good and bad is always bad, according to reason. The theologian of the cross, as Luther said, calls a spade a spade. So what is good actually may be bad, and what I see as bad actually may be good. Put that into your own words. Now I'll give you a couple examples. Okay. Let's say I help a little old lady across the street. Good. There was a good thing that I did. And for her, it's always a good deed, whether my motives are pure or not. She got across the street safe. That good deed, that outwardly by my eyeballs are good. If I say, look, I'm a good person, right? God will love me because I did this. That good deed is actually evil because it worked against faith. So my good deeds, if I rely on them, are actually evil for me because they work against faith and love. So my eyeball said good, but God's word said no, bad. For the theologian of the opposite is this. I, had something bad happen to me, and it forced me to fall on my knees and rethink some things and started going back to Jesus. That bad thing, cancer, an accident, bankruptcy, that bad thing actually was good. And the only way I can know that is by my eardrums, if God told me. Because my reason can't go there. Because I don't have all the information. I don't have the view of God. So, think about looking at the world through the lenses of the cross. If God can make that awful Friday good, then he can make my cross beneficial to me. Now I have hope. Now I have a basis for strong mental health. Now I can take chances in my love. Right? When you love somebody, you put yourself out there, right? You may be taken advantage of, charity and whatever. Do you see that this now becomes kind of a basis for a good life of hope, of love, of security, yeah? Because I'm not going to fall apart, because I know eternity is written in my heart, and I also know that what is outwardly bad will be used for good for God, by God, right? So, this is a conversation, a deep conversation, But this is the type of conversation you have apologetically with people who are wondering this question. That neighbor who just found out that her mother got breast cancer. You need to go and listen, ask questions, but listen. When the time's right, you'll be able to shine. Yeah? Maybe not with these words. In fact, I would kind of be too academic. But you can start saying, here's your options. Either this has no meaning and then your mom dies and you're going to be sad. But there's another option here, and the option is this beautiful story of a God who came to the ugliness and the pain for you and your mom. And there's meaning to this suffering. Okay. So far so good? Are you buying what I'm selling? Maybe? Okay. You say no? I mean, that's totally respectable. No, you're broke. Okay. No. I would have respected more if you said no. Yeah. All right. I think that we have put an impossible burden on your generation. Now, I'm old enough to be a guy, get off my lawn kind of guy, right? Where like, these kids don't know how to do any work and they don't remember. I would tell you about when I was a kid, we had to do all this stuff and you guys have it too easy and blah, blah, blah. And some of it's true, right? But then I remember that that's what my parents' generation said about me, and I'm pretty sure my grandparents said about my parents and their parents and their parents, and it just keeps going. Unless you're pushing rock for the pharaoh, maybe you ought to just count your blessings, right? Instead of trying to be self-righteous, yeah. But some of it's true. At the same time, I take a step back and I say, there has been an impossible burden placed upon your generation, and you don't even know that it's there because you've known nothing else. And the impossible burden is that you would have to be your own God. And I don't know if you've ever put it that way or thought about that way, but that's what we've done to you. So I want you to maybe take 20 seconds and list things that you cannot give or you cannot do because you're not divine. One thing is, just to get you an example going here, you cannot know everything, therefore you cannot come to 100% certainty. That was the example we gave. So if you just put certainty, that's a correct answer. God can do certainty and give certainty, and by definition, only a God can. What are some things that only a God can do? That only a God can do. You know who I'm calling on. You got something down? Did you just put certainty? That's all you have? Things only, by definition, a divine being can do. I don't even think Christian God is any divine being, whatever you want to call it, the guy in the sky or whatever. Who wants to share? We got certainty. Anybody want to share? Yeah. Okay, I would say any kind of, not just life or death, but any kind of life, right? This is going to ruin your weekend. You did not choose to live. You did not choose your name. You did not choose to be a person of faith. Remember, even an atheist has to believe because you don't have all the information. These are the types of things we're talking about. Anybody else got something that they, yeah? Order, okay. Peace. Yeah. Salvation? Okay, forgiveness, absolute forgiveness. Yeah. Okay, standards, huh? This is good stuff, yeah.
Morality.
Yeah, morality, I think I put standards and morality, same bucket, yeah. Yeah, this is what I'm after. You cannot come up with the order of the creation, life itself. You cannot come up with absolute certainty or the ability to like work things towards what we call a telos, an end or a goal. You cannot give yourself worth or identity either. Okay? So let me narrow this down. Truth, morality, identity, value. Truth, morality, identity, value. Let's concentrate on truth, identity, morality, value. Real quick. Again, this is a mental health issue, which I think is applicable in apologetics because this is the stuff you're talking about with your friends. We've been really, 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 really good in our society at telling you that your value is not to be found in society. Right? We've been telling you that since you were little. You don't let anybody tell you this, that, or the other thing. Oh man, I'm on behind this, yeah. Right. And the standards of popularity and fashion and whatever, they go that, and then we tell you about the horrific things in history where one group of people didn't like another group of people and killed them. Don't let anybody say that your value is dependent on the opinions of other people. We're very good at saying that. I don't think we actually live by it, because we still follow fashion and worry about if people are like us or not, right? But at least we say it. Here's where we're lacking. We don't also say to you, but you yourself do not have the ability to give yourself value either. We all get it that my value should not be pinned on the opinions of other people. But that also applies to me. And do you see why this matters? Because if you are then the value giver, what if you have a bad day and a dark night? Or what if you look in the mirror and you go, yeah, I don't think I'm that great. You know, honesty. This is where people spiral. Right? I'm here to tell you that you're valuable, whether society says so or not, and you're valuable whether you think so or not. Because value has to come from outside of you. You can't come from within you. You don't get to just say you're something. That doesn't work philosophically. So the value has to come from outside of you. The truth has to come from outside of you, because otherwise it's your opinion versus my opinion. And neither of us are smart enough to know all of the things. And morality has to come from outside of us, as we're going to talk about in our next session. Here's one last deep philosophical thing. In the last 15, 20 years, we're obsessed with identity, identifying yourself. This is illogical on a lot of different ways. If I have to identify myself and you have to identify yourself, and I can't identify you, you can't identify me, yeah? Then A, there is no sense of human rights. Because there's nothing that says I need to value you. Right? The other thing is, I can't see myself. I can see the tip of my nose, I can see my arms, I used to be able to see my feet. But you say, oh, just look in the mirror. That's not me. That is a reflection of me. Well, why don't you just take a selfie? Well, first of all, I'm 47 years old, but also, the selfie, how many times do I take the selfie before I get the picture that I like? When you were 4 years old, who knew you the best? Mom. Can you guess who knows me the best right now? It ain't me. It's my wife. I got this passage from Paul that I can't get out of my head for the last 10 years. That I will know as I am in heaven. I will fully know as I am fully known. Stay with me, hold on. Only God has the perspective enough to judge me. I don't have the perspective enough to judge me. I can't see my back. I can't see anything. And if I can only identify this, in order to do that, I have to differentiate between myself and this podium and between myself and you. In order to make myself identifiable to myself, I have to identify you. Because I have to say, here's where you're stopped and here's where I begin. Here's how you're different than me. I have to identify you. Yep. So the idea that I can just identify myself without a standard is absolutely bonkers crazy. Here's the payoff. We have told your generation to come up with your own truth, to find your own value, to you do you, to believe in yourself and to identify yourself. We have put a God-sized burden on your shoulders and you don't have to carry it. All right, we have a 15-minute break? 10 minutes. Let's make it a full 10, so we'll come back at
1:40. Stretch, you can get up, go to the bathroom.
Is this thing on? All right. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Okay. Let me make two comments before we get into our third material. Let me go back to the faith thing for a little bit. There's a lot of apologetic stuff out there, and it mostly comes from an evangelical world, which is okay. We love them. They do good stuff. But some of them, they get to the point where they say, now make your decision for Jesus, right? You've heard this. And I think this is problematic because, that's not how the Bible speaks about salvation, but also it works against the idea of love and faith just in general. So we have to be careful here that when we do apologetics and evangelism, we're not like, no, what are you going to do with it now? What, you're going to come to church now? Come. You have to play the long game and just let the Holy Spirit do the Holy Spirit's work in the way that he's going to do it. You just need to be just be a part of this, be faithful, and it'll be fine. Here's why I mean that it works against the very nature of love and faith. Did you always trust your mother? I mean, maybe you don't now, but that's a personal issue. I mean, like when you were one. Yeah. You ever been into a hospital room with a newborn baby and a new mother, and see them interact? Would you call that love and trust? Yes? Okay. Do you think that you were ever in your mother's womb in the second trimester and you're like, oh, I think she's been pretty good to me. I think I'll decide to trust and love her. You don't decide to trust and love, right? And the idea that this is somehow a cognitive decision works against the very nature of what a human being is and how we interact, right? It's an interesting thing to think about. By the way, if God's waiting for you to make the decision, that makes him, I think, one of the most awful beings that we could even imagine. And here's why. Imagine you're a parent and you have a newborn baby and you bring the baby home from the hospital in a little car seat, and you set the car seat down on the front porch and you're like, hey, Junior, when you're ready to make your decision to be a part of this family, we will love and protect you. Knock when you're ready and close the door. That would make you a monster. Why in the world do we think that God would act that way? You cannot accept love. You can only reject it. If one of my daughters runs away from my home and says, I hate you, never want to see you again, I still love her. Yeah. And she can always come back. She can reject the love, but you can't accept it. Accepting it assumes that I'm doing something. But then if you do something, then it's not love. Here's something to tattoo on your heart. If you have to earn love, it's by definition not love. Everybody you meet is going to be in what I call a wage system. And that is, they're always working according to a law to earn their value, to earn love. It's how the world works. You study, you get a good grade on the test. You don't study, you get a bad grade. You show up to work on time, you get paid. You don't show up to work on time, you're going to get paid less. That's a wage system. A gift system is the complete opposite, and that is truly an unconditional gift. Yeah? And when you're talking to people, know that about them, that they're trying to be right. They're trying to be righteous according to some law. Whether it be intellectual superiority, whether it be making a lot of money, whether it be popularity or whatever it is. And what a tragedy that is. Can you free them from that by showing them love, by getting through these arguments, getting to the idea not just of the existence of God, but also the love of God? Oh, by the way, that whole wage gift thing, that's Paul's argument in Romans. And you all memorized his final line in that argument. He says, for the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus. You want to be in a wage system with God? The wages of sin is death, dummy. Right? You want to get paid? You want to get paid for what you did? The wages of sin is death, but the gift is eternal life in Christ Jesus. Okay, I wanted to talk about that first. Second thing I want to talk about before we get to the material is just to kind of put a bow on that last part I was saying. Kind of got sloppy at the end there. I really do believe that you have always lived with this burden, so you don't know that you don't have to live with this burden. That you have to put yourself out there as a brand, identify yourself. You're all alone. You have to do all of these things. You have to come up with your own truth, your own morality, your own identity, your own whatever. And I'm going to tell you that by definition, only a divine being can do those things. Because you're limited in your perspective, yeah? And you're limited by your ability to identify things by yourself, yeah? And this has, I think, wreaked havoc on our mental health. Everybody tells me that we have a mental health crisis, and there's a lot of reasons for that, and it's complicated. But I think this is one of the reasons we need to talk about more and more. That we have put a divine-sized burden on your shoulders. And I'm here to tell you, and you're here to tell your skeptical friends, they don't have to carry that. They don't have to carry that. And they're putting too much hope in the wrong things, and they will be disappointed. Okay, enough of that. Let's go to the classical arguments for the existence of God. The first one is the moral argument. The moral argument goes like this. If God does not exist, objective moral values and duties do not exist. Objective morals and duties do exist, therefore God exists. Okay, the idea here is this. If you've ever said, that's just wrong, or that's unfair, or that is illegal, or whatever, from an ethical point of view, you have made an objective statement. You didn't say, I think murder's wrong. You're like, no, that's just wrong. Well, if it's just wrong, you are appealing to something outside of yourself. So this is the example. You're appealing to something outside of yourself that cannot be found inside of yourself. Because if I come up with my own morals, and you come up with your own morals, and they're different, the only way to solve that is who has the bigger gun or more money. All right. Now, our world is trying to insist that there is no right or wrong, there is no truth, there is no morality. I'm going to say, but you actually don't live that way. Right? I mean, one way to, if someone says, like, everything's relative and there is no right or wrong, truth or falsity, punch them in the face. Don't do that. You're like, was that wrong? Yeah? All of a sudden, things are wrong when it happens to you. Better yet, just say your flies down and see if they look. Because if they look, then it's not relative anymore. Yeah? There is actually truth. There is actually a right and wrong and truth and falsity. All right. This also has to do with human rights. Let's just play this game just for a little bit. Let's imagine you have a school cat. Yeah, and the cat and the cat's in the chapel here. And there's a little mouse and the cat comes and like grabs it, plays with it, kills it, and drops it in front of me. Yeah, you got it? All right. Now imagine like a freshman is like, and a senior comes by and captures it and plays with it, kills it, and drops it in front of me. Yeah. What's the difference? What's the difference? You don't know what the difference, because if you don't get this answer right, genocide and everything falls apart. What makes those two things different? Let me put it a different way. Why should I treat you with respect and not like an animal, a mouse or a rat? I don't know if you know this, but there are times in history when some groups of people would consider other people vermin that needed to be exterminated. So we have to get this answer correctly. And I'm afraid that our world has lost the answer. Yeah? Okay, you say it's because he got a soul. All right? Who else has got an answer? So I got one answer, soul. Okay, we have more inherent. Why, though? That's the question. Why? Okay, we got a soul. What else? Yeah? Okay, God says so. All right, yeah. What else we got? Yeah? Yeah. No. You're not. Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. So I got soul. I got God said so. Yeah? I never thought of that. That's the first time I've gotten that answer. That's the first time I've gotten that answer. I think it's incorrect, but that's the first time I got that answer. So so it's okay if you kill other species, just not your own. Well, that's what I'm saying. Why would I throw the senior in prison but not the cat into kitty prison? Yeah, why though? But what makes us different? We got soul. Okay, morality. We're moral creatures and they're not. Okay, I got soul, morality. I'm going to skip your God said so for a little bit because that's the correct answer, right? Yeah. What are the other reasons people would give? We have reason. Yeah. I know, but why? Why does that matter? Why does that matter? That's what I'm after. Are you going to try again? All right, go for it. Listen. That's actually very thoughtful and stuff. I want you to run by your next answer with those guys before you. All right, okay. What's your name? I like you. Simeon. All right. Okay. Here's the answers people usually give. We have a soul. We're moral creatures. We're reasonable. We have reason that the animals don't. Some people say we have wonderment. We have wonderment. We are self-aware in the way animals are not, right? And I think all of those answers are good, but not good enough. Who says that the animals don't have souls? God calls some of the animals soulish. They got something. They have a life force. They have something. I mean, if we don't want to call them a soul because that's confusing, but more accurately, we can only be sure that they don't have a human soul. So now I got the same problem. What's the difference between a human soul and the life force of a cat or even a plant, right? I still need to find the value there. Some say we're reasonable. I don't know if you've been paying attention to this world, but I kind of doubt that. But reason, do you know that there was this thing, I think it was in England, they ran some sort of experiment or whatever. They had like a little tin can, like coffee can, you know? And a little water and a bird, or in a worm. And the birds couldn't get the beak in there. So you know what these birds did? They took pebble by pebble slowly into there to raise the water up to get the worm. That's reason. I mean, I would have had my hand stuck in there, you know. Who says they don't have reason? Who says they don't have wonderment? Who says they don't have these things? I'm not sure that we can determine the difference between us and animals by these sort of arbitrary things. And what if I personally lose my reason, lose my wonderment? What if I get Alzheimer's? Am I not valuable and I'm not deserving of those protections anymore? Do you see the problem here? By every answer that we give on why we should have human rights, why we should be valuable, is all geared on towards something on the inside, but that's a fuzzy thing because who says those things should be the barometer of why we don't kill each other? And who says the animals don't have those things? And who says, by what level do I have them? Should be either an IQ test? You think that's funny, but this has happened in their history. I would suggest that the only thing that you know for sure that gives you value is that there's an outside thing that says so. This is only by definition what a divine thing can do. And if we put that burden on you, I think you're going to fall apart. The answer is because we're created the image of God. Yeah? Now, by the way, we talk about the image of God in two ways. This is a side note. One is a broad sense, everybody's created in the image of God. That's a value designation. You are different than the animals. Yes, it comes with certain things that are better than the animals, but really it's a designation of what God has said about you. That, this is how we talk about it in the narrow sense, the perfect image of God, righteousness, is lost in the fall and is restored in Jesus Christ. So I'm valuable and your atheist neighbor is valuable because they're created in the image of God. And because God said, I died for that person precisely because they're in the image of God. He died for them in a different way than he died for the dolphins. Okay, now let's imagine that you're going to create a society. And I think there's only 3 places where you can ground reality for your make-believe society. In simian land, yeah? Yeah? All right. The first level is beneath you. The second level is on your level. And the third level is above you. So if you want to do above number 1 so it's visually pleasing, go for it. Above your level and below. Let's start with below. So my morality comes from basically nature, something below me. So I look out into nature and I find the rules of law. Now, there's some truth to this, right? Because God has written not his saving truth, but truth into nature. We call this the book of nature. And there are some things we can learn by observing the natural world. But what's the problem if I would design my society based on the laws of nature? What would that kind of look like, yeah? Yeah, okay, we got the survival of the fittest, right? Also, there would be a thinning of the herd. One of the things that our world is not really financially equipped to do is to keep old people around. We figured out how to keep the body alive, but not always the mind, and so we got a lot of nursing home. This is what costs the county a lot of money, is like nursing home and hospice care. Why should we keep old people around? I mean, what are they really doing for us anyway, right? The laws of nature say what? Thin the herd. We would be stronger for it and more financially stable if we said, here's the limit. 85, you're done. Or if you can't pass your driver's test, see ya. Yeah? Don't think that that's not a real possibility in our future, right? So I think we'd all agree that if I find the basis for right and wrong in nature, this is tricky business, and this is going to probably end up in justifying a whole lot of violence, right? There's more to that story, but we got to keep moving. Now things on your level, that's yourself or society. We've already talked about how the self is problematic, because it's just my opinion versus your opinion, and this is going to be a problem. Society just has the same problem because it's my society versus your society. Now, if we would ask this to 100 people on the street, what's the best way to run a society? I think still most people would go, democracy, right? We'll vote. What's the problem with morality by vote? Yeah. Yeah. What if the majority say, these people with these certain genes are going to be more valuable than those people who don't have our genes? Could happen, right? Or happens all the time. You also have a problem with moral reformers. Let's think about the civil rights movement in the 60s. Jim Crow laws and stuff like that. And somebody from the north goes down to Alabama and says, you can't do that. And the people in Alabama go, yeah, but we decided to do it that way. How dare you tell us what to do? And they're like, oh, I guess I can't say that because you voted. Yeah? You can't have any moral reform. One person can't tell another person. One society can't tell another society that they're wrong. You know the Nazis never did anything illegal, right? They just changed the law before they did it. Yeah? And so, by the way, the Colonel Jackson, who was ahead of the Nuremberg trials, which was throwing Nazis into jail after World War II, because we won. I don't know if you knew that. We won. And they had to appeal to a law above the law. You see what they did? There has to be a law above the society. Well, that became international law. You know what the problem with international law is? Who gets to decide what international law is? And you know what country really doesn't like international law? America. Because we don't want Denmark telling us what to do. What they're really after is a law above the law above the law. And that finally has to be a divine thing. Yeah? If there's going to be an absolute for all people, it has to be outside of all people. Well, what's outside of all people? And that's God. Think about it this way. Think about the sun. So if you're in New York City and it's a clear day, can you see the sun? Yeah? If you're in San Francisco on that same day and it's a clear day, can you see the sun? Yeah. Can the people in San Francisco and New York see each other? Not without technology. But they both can look to the sun. You have to have a reference point that everybody can point to. Yeah? And you don't have any other option but a divine being, right? And so the argument for the existence of God for morals is to say, you can't, without God, there's no objective morals, just because otherwise the only other option is your opinion versus my opinion that's subjective. But there are objective morals, therefore God exists. That's the argument. Now, someone may say, well, there's no objective morals. And I just say, you don't live that way. You simply don't live that way. You simply don't go around saying, whatever. Kind of a side note to the side note, if that's okay. Can I go on a tangent for a little bit? Would that be okay? Thanks. All right. What do you do with the violence of the Old Testament? Yeah? What do you do with all of the evil in this world then, if there's objective right and wrong? Well, first of all, the very fact that I can call it evil means that there's an objective right and wrong. That has to come from somewhere. But still, this is problematic. And I'm not going to make excuses for God. I'm not going to let him off the hook. And I'm going to have some humility and say, I wasn't there, I don't know. But I will give you a couple things to think about. Dear skeptical friend. One is you don't have the perspective God does. You don't know what he's doing. And when you look at particularly the Old Testament, first of all, he's dealing with ancient Near East people. Look what he's got to deal with. Think about it this way: if let's say you volunteer and coach the local boys B basketball team, and you only got 2 on the bench. You got 7 guys, 2 on the bench. They're all like 5'2", a little chubby, can't jump. Yeah, and you go 1-10 in the league. Does that make you the worst coach in the league? Not necessarily. Every other coach may have gone winless, but you eked out one. You got them. You may be the best coach in the league. Look what you got to deal with. For us to go to God and be like, why didn't you just look what he's got to deal with? You and me, right? And you're like, why doesn't he just then change it all and make us do other things? Oh, really? That's what you want from God? You don't even want it from your parents. Your teacher's telling you what to do, right? And so it's almost as if God can never win with us. Yeah? In the Old Testament, though, if you pay attention, yeah, there's a lot of violence, but remember, he always gives people a chance to mend their ways. Sometimes groups of people's like hundreds of years and stuff like that. Now, if your grandma was brutally mugged, would you want justice for her? Yes? And that justice would come from your idea of love. Yes? Because you love her. And I'm willing to bet that you would want it swift and merciless if they caught that guy. Just a quick poll. We're all against human trafficking? Yes? Okay. I didn't want to assume. You be you. We're all against genocide? Okay, yeah? All right. All of the other things that are bad? Yeah? Okay. God saw all of those things for years and years and years and years and years and years. Often before he reacted. If you pay attention, your criticism of God is not that he is too violent, is that he was far too patient with those people. Only Western upper middle class and middle class people, that's you and me because you're sitting here and not working in a blood diamond mine, will complain about God just being too mad. You know that person working in a blood diamond mine for pennies a day so some girl from Orange County can have a big rock on her finger one day? You know what his criticism of God is? Why doesn't he smite the greedy West? God can never win with us. So maybe you ought to back off on the criticism of God and say, first of all, there is a morality that has to come from somewhere. And how you adjudicate that is a very difficult thing. You have blood in your veins, right? Or you have vengeance in your veins for people that harm you, but you want forgiveness for yourself. Why is God making such a big deal with me? But you will down someone's throat if they cut you off on the freeway, right? Here's the difference between your anger and God's anger. His anger truly is righteous. It has a solution, his son, right? And by the way, he allows you to lament. You're allowed to be, God, why you did this? Yeah? He gives you the words in the Psalms. Your justice and your anger at best is just an emotional sort of reaction to what you think is unfair. Okay. All right, so far so good with the argument morality. The idea here is, if there's an objective morality that can only come from a divine being, you don't have to use the word God, you can, whatever, it's got to be something though, right? So this argument, I think it's a powerful argument. It's not a perfect argument. There are no perfect arguments. It doesn't get us to Jesus or the Christian God, by the way. It just says there has to be something. Cosmological argument for the existence of God. This is the next philosophical one. By the way, these are ancient ones. Aristotle came up with these. St. Thomas Aquinas talked about these. These are not, this next one is famous in the Islamic world. This is not a Christian thing. This is a philosophical thing. The cosmological argument goes like this. Everything that began to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause. So, here's how the argument goes. Everything's contingent. And what I mean by contingent is that it didn't pop into existence all by itself. It was contingent on another cause. Here's an example. You didn't just pop into existence. You are contingent on your parents. And your parents didn't just into existence. They were dependent on your grandparents, and who are dependent on your great-grandparents, who are dependent on your great-great-grandparents, and so on and so forth. You get what I'm saying? Nothing just popped into existence. It has to have a cause. All right. Now, I don't think that's a controversial thing. We've never seen anything just pop into existence out of nothing. By the way, there are some people who would say, but maybe someday we'll figure out how that happened. And they'll say, but maybe, the thing came out of a vacuum or some sort of energy force. And I go, oh, no. No, I mean nothing. Here's another thing that's going to ruin your weekend. There's two kinds of nothing. If I say there's nothing there, you wouldn't call me a liar. But there's something there. There's like air. Even if there was no air, there would be a vacuum, or there would be an empty space. An empty space is still something. No, I mean nothing. Contemplate this weekend nothing. Nothing. Oof. This is why philosophers go crazy. Right. What you're telling me I have to believe is that something out of nothing would pop into existence. So that means that the universe began to exist. By the way, everybody believes that the universe began to exist, not always in the past. In fact, even in the recent past, there were people who believed that the universe was eternal. It just kind of went around and around and around. That's a little bit problematic because you have like, it's not a home run argument, but you have the laws of like thermodynamics, right? Can't create energy. Once you use it, you can't, right? And there's only a finite amount of energy. So if we were past eternal, we would have already used up all the energy, right? And so there had to be a beginning. By the way, the Big Bang cosmology, right? Cosmology means cause, you know, that started whatever. It really was the greatest thinker and the one who coined the phrase and the one who made it popular was a Catholic priest. And it originally was rejected by many scientists because they thought he was sneaking God into science. Because if you have a Big Bang, and don't any of you laugh, ready? I'm looking at you. If you have a Big Bang, then you have to have a Big Banger. You have to have somebody that goes boom. Because otherwise you have to convince me that something popped into existence out of nothing. Yeah? So this is accepted now, Big Bang cosmology, and I'm not going to talk about that, but just the point that it had to have a beginning. All right? So if something began to exist, somebody had to cause it. So let's go back to the argument, the philosophical argument, in its simplest form. You can buy books this big that play it all out, but this is its simplest form. Everything that began to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. Now let's just assume for a second that the universe has a cause. Give me some adjectives of that cause. So don't use the word God, just logically. If there is something that caused this universe to go, yeah? Give me an adjective of that thing. What would it have to be? I would say pretty darn powerful. What else? Okay, ordered. Yeah? Okay, can I say outside of time? Like somehow, whatever it is, yeah? Did you approve that? Okay. Yeah? Pretty darn smart. Yeah? Uncaused, very good. Uncaused. Yeah? Maybe. What if it's evil?
I'll be the judge.
All right, okay. Pretty darn powerful, pretty darn smart, outside of time, also outside of space, uncaused, one that everybody misses. Free. Because if somebody forced it to do it, it's not truly free. So it's a free agent, which I think is important because if we're creating the image of God, there's sort of a sense that we were made for freedom. Okay, now notice, what does that sound like? It sure sounds like God. Sure sounds like God, right? Yeah. Now the argument against the cosmological argument is to say, and this is from David Hume, is that we actually don't know what causes actually are. Like he would say if a billiard ball came and knocked another billiard ball, we assume that this force then caused this motion, but we actually don't know. And that's their argument. It's like, well, we just don't know. I'm like, I kind of know. I'm pretty sure, not with absolute certainty, but I'm pretty sure, right? So this is a good argument, like it had to come from somewhere. This thing had to come from somewhere. All right, the teleological or design argument goes like this. All things have an order or arrangement and work for an end. The order of the universe cannot be explained by chance, but only by design and purpose. Design and purpose is a product of intelligence. Therefore, nature is directed by a divine intelligence or great designer. All right, the idea here is that this world is just fantastic. Things work in an order and a purpose and an end. Telos is the Greek word for end, destiny, design, purpose. It's all those. Think telescope. I'm looking to the end, right? What's the goal? When Jesus died on the cross, he said, it is finished, and it was a form of the word for telos there, to telestai, right? So end, goal, purpose, that kind of stuff. So we talk about this all the way. What's the purpose of the heart? What does the heart do? Pumps blood for what end? To bring oxygen into, whatever, so that you're alive, right? And so the telos is actually a really important thing, right? But if there is no designer, there is no design or purpose or end. Can you connect this to the mental health thing I was talking about last session? If there is no God, there is no purpose. If there is no purpose, I don't have a purpose. And if life gets a little rough, I'm not sure why I bother. But if there is a God, there is a purpose, and therefore then there is a telos, an end, and therefore if the news is good news, then I have hope, right? I have hope. Okay, so a couple of the arguments. So the word purpose and design on the bottom of page 8, I don't think you can use that without a divine being. Because if there is just randomness and no order, then you can't talk about purpose, right? Okay, so maybe, I think we have time real quick to, I'll give two examples of teleological arguments. One is the fine-tuning of the universe. The idea here is that there's certain things in the universe that have to be finely tuned. Like, we need to be this far away from the sun, because if we're a little closer to the sun, we burn up. If we're a little farther, we freeze. The rate of gravity, radiation, all of these things have to be pretty precise for there to be life, right? Okay. If any of those are just off a click, then there is no life. And so most scientists, by the way, are religious. This whole idea that, I think that's a little bit of a misnomer, that the scientific world is just a bunch of atheists. No, they're not. There's actually very few atheists. They may not believe in a personal God. They may not believe in Jesus Christ. They may not believe in Allah or anything like that. But most people are like, I think there's something. And one of the reasons is like, what are the chances that things pop into existence out of nothing? I think 0. And then that everything would then come to this preciseness so that there could be life. So even they will say, even the atheist scientists will say, it seems like this was ordered for life. Or they'll say, we won the cosmic lottery. There's like no way that this would happen. Now, a counter argument is to say, but because it happened, therefore, that proves that it could happen by chance. But that's a logical fallacy. Just because something happened, therefore, because something actually happened doesn't mean that your cause is the exact cause, right? Okay. The other one is the irreducible complexity argument. The irreducible complexity is that there are certain things in biology that act as small machines, or simple machines, that they cannot work independently of themselves, but different parts have to be put together in order to work properly. So think of a mouse trap. What do I got in a mouse trap? I got a piece of wood, I got a spring, I got the thing that takes down the mouse, and I got the little bar that holds it, right? And then you know what I'm, okay. If I just put those things out, would it, just threw them on the floor, would they catch a mouse? In fact, what purpose would any of those things serve? They only work when they're put together like a machine. So in order for everything to be random, you have to have different parts, like the eyeball, even down to like certain things like even bacteria that work like small machines. You have to then say these different parts evolved with a completely different purpose, and then somehow not only came together, but then were put together to work as a machine, And then this is why we have all of these things. And at some point, I go, hey man, I don't have a strong enough faith to believe in that. I don't have a strong enough faith to believe that things pop into existence out of nothing and that there is no purpose in this world, and then just happens that all these complex things in this universe, in my body and in the whole world, just came together by randomness. I don't have that kind of faith. Right? Okay. All right. Let's keep going. All right. If we have time, we'll come back to justice, but I'm afraid we're not going to have enough time. Let's talk the soul. Remember, I made an argument. I said, listen, I think you can make a pretty strong argument of the historicity of the resurrection of the dead. I'm not saying a home run. I'm just saying, as history goes, when we use if we use the same tools that we use in any other portion of our history, education, and exploration and archaeology, you have to admit that we have more archaeological and textual and even historical evidence that Jesus really did do the things that the Bible says he did. All right. But what's the hang up? Because if this was a story without a resurrection of the dead, nobody would deny it. Nobody would deny the story of Jesus except for the miraculous parts. Yeah? They may not accept Jesus, but they're not going to say it's historically inaccurate. Okay. So the problem is they don't want to believe in the idea of a miracle, especially a resurrection. But I would say if you can get them to believe in the existence of a soul, and maybe they don't want to call it a soul because that's too churchy, then you can get them to be at least open-minded as the possibility of a resurrection, and this is why. Because once you say that there is a non-physical existing thing, it's a funny way to say it, but I said that on purpose. There's a non-physical entity that exists. Now I'm in the realm outside of biology and my physical material being into the spiritual realm, which everybody in the history of the world just assumed existed. Well, now things are possible. Now things are possible. So, how can I get my skeptical friend to believe that he or she has a soul? One is just how you judge people, kind of thing. Let me give you an example. Have you ever said? Have you ever heard or said or agreed with this statement that you should judge people by the inside, not the outside? Have we heard this? Don't judge people by the outside, by the inside. Well, what do you mean the inside? Their large intestine? What do you mean judge them by the inside? You mean their personality, their mind, their heart, but you don't actually mean the thing beating. You mean the thing that you can't put a finger on. And if you don't want to use the word soul, that's fine, but that's what you're talking about. You know the guy on the basketball team who's like 5'2", and he can't shoot and can't jump, and he's not that fast, but man, he's scrappy. We say, that guy's got a lot of heart. You don't mean he has a lot of heart, because if he does, he shouldn't be on the basketball court, because he's probably got a heart problem that's going to explode. You mean he's got something that you cannot explain by biology or physics or chemistry. Yeah. All right. So, dear skeptical friend, you talk as if there is a soul. Let me give you another example. Let's imagine I was in college and I fell in love with a girl. Her name was Amanda. And let's say at that time I was a true Darwinist. I really believe there is no soul. There's no non-physical world. No God, no angels, no soul, no morality, whatever. You're just your biology. But I fell in love with her anyway. And so this is what I would have to say. If I was being intellectually honest, I would get down on one knee and I'd be like, Amanda, I'm so happy that the chemicals in my brain make me feel funny around you. And that I have this evolutionary desire to keep this species around by making babies with you. Will you marry me? She said yes anyway, man. I know. What do you, hey. You know, it's a full package. Um, people still wonder why she married me. Yeah, anyway. Um, I can't have love without a soul. I only have biological instinct. I cannot have courage without a soul. I can only have biological instinct. I can't have valor. I cannot have any of what I'm going to call the soul words unless there is a soul. Can't have any of the virtues. But dear skeptical friend, you don't live that way. You don't think about your children and you're like, I'm not going to eat them, even though some animals do, because I want to keep the species around. And that's just the natural thing. But if I would eat them, that wouldn't be wrong, because that's just, natural order of things. You don't live like that way, man. You live at there is more than the body. Here's another argument. All right. Cognitive behavior therapy. There's this professor who used to work at UCLA, and he's a psychologist, but also would take brain scans of patients. So imagine that you have anxiety. If you do, I'm sorry. And let's imagine that you have such anxiety that coming to school is very difficult for you. And you live in town, and you pull up and you park, and then you go home. And so you go to the therapist, and the therapist says, "Okay, this is what I want to do. I don't want to do anything with your brain matter. Let's first try cognitive behavior therapy." I say, I want you to sit there before you open the door, and I want you to say 3 times to yourself, "I can do this. There is no reason I cannot do this. Everybody else can do it, I can do it." And so you do that a bunch of times, and it works. You get out of the door, and you get to the front door, and then you run back home. And the doctor says, "Good, we made progress." Now when you get to that front door, I want you to go, I'm lying to myself. I have false information. I have false words that say I can't do this. This is only something in my brain. I can do this, right? And so you're able to open the door, and you get to the classroom door, and then you run home. And the doctor's like, "Good, progress. That's fantastic." And then he says, the final one is to say, before you get to that classroom door, I want to say, "They're not looking at me. I have no evidence that they're judging me. I have no evidence that they're judging me. It's even worse. They don't even care." No. Right. And so you get, and you're able to sit in the back, not participate, but this is a victory. You get an education. During this time of your therapy, imagine a doctor taking brain scans. This is what Jeffrey Schwartz did. And he noticed that the brain matter, the thing on the inside your skull, literally changed through people's therapy. And so the question becomes, what changed the brain matter? There was no medicine, there was no surgery. There's lots of different possibilities of what changed the brain matter. You can grow and that kind of stuff. And he said, well, at least it's plausible, a possibility, that something changed the brain matter that was not physical, because we have no evidence of anything physical changing the brain matter, but it changed. Maybe there was something spiritual that changed the brain matter, i.e. the soul. This is controversial, but I think it's very interesting. And to start contemplating how the soul and the body interact. By the way, where's the soul? Where, like in the middle of your chest? Your sternum? Inside of you? Where inside of you? That's what I'm asking. Where? You pointed to your sternum, so I'm going to go with sternum. Okay, all right. Some of the ancients thought it was in your belly. I think we would say either in the mind or if we're maybe the heart, right? It says a lot about your society where it is, right? We're thinkers. It's in our brain. I think the best way to think is all of your body, all of your soul is in all of your body all of the time. So you're right. What do you getting the answers from over there? Yeah. All right. All of your soul is in all of your body all of the time. Do you think the soul can affect the body and the body can affect the soul? Hey, where's a freshman? As we all know, we cannot prove the existence of a soul. The only thing we can prove in a courtroom is that we are biologically existent. We have stuff, and we're made of molecules. We're a clump of cells. And 47-year-old Mike Berg is a completely different clump of cells than 17-year-old Mike Berg. And it would be the height of hypocrisy in our legal system to throw somebody into prison for somebody else's crime. Because we all know that our cells reproduce. And so the cells that I have right here, 47-year-old Mike Berg, completely different cells than that 17-year-old Mike Berg, that jerk who did that. How could you throw me into prison for that? I'm probably still going to jail, right? Why? I think I made a pretty good argument. If I'm just stuff, why throw me into prison at all, by the way? and if I'm different stuff than that guy 30 years ago. We instinctively understand I'm the same person. Well, why? Because there's a string of memories? Because I'm only partially myself. I'm always connected, but I'm not that person I am over there. We instinctively understand that we're the same person. The best explanation, the explanation that we all have in our mind without articulating it, is that we're more than our bodies. Here's another one that's interesting, near-death experiences. These are such a phenomenon that scientists are studying near-death experiences. It happens too often. Now, I'm going to eliminate some of them for our purposes. The first one is somebody had a dream and they saw Jesus, or I don't know how many times I went and saw a shut-in, and Gertrude's like, I saw Frank. I'm like, Gertrude, Frank's been dead for 2 years, and I told you not to eat meatball sandwiches after midnight. Check your medicine. Yeah. I'm going to eliminate them because I can't prove them. I can't. Maybe Jesus sent a message. I really kind of doubt it, but sure, maybe. All right, but I can't prove it. There's also evidence of people who are in comas who are able to articulate with accuracy specific details of things that happened in that room. So there's people in comas who would tell you this is exactly what the doctor said, the nurse said, and stuff like that. Or they're not in a coma but under anesthesia. I'm still going to eliminate that as not proving the existence of the soul, because the brain is the last frontier of medical science. And maybe you can pick up things, right? Who knows? Who knows? But then there are cases where people are under anesthesia or in comas who are able to articulate with accuracy things that happened in a different location. And it's enough that the University of Virginia has a group that has studied this. University of Virginia was Thomas Jefferson's university. It was the first university not tied to a church in America. This is not a Bible-believing institution as the way your high school is and my college is. They have to study these things. And there's one, I'm going to butcher the details, but there's one case of a girl who's drowned, accident by a lake, and she's in a coma, and they take her to the hospital. And the doctors do this thing, like, there's nothing we can do, go home, eat, get rest. They're saying that to the family. We'll call you if anything happens. And while they're away, she wakes up, and she starts talking about her family, and the doctors call the family, and before they let the family in, because they know about this phenomenon, they go, what did you eat? Who said this or whatever? And what she said was accurate. That's more than spooky. I think that proves that there's the ability of the soul to exist outside of the body and to sense things, which makes perfect sense to a Christian and perfect sense to most ancient people. Yeah? That we can have an out-of-body experience. Why not, right? This does not prove that what they say is accurate, does not prove, it could be of the devil. It doesn't prove Jesus is Lord, doesn't prove anything. All it proves is that there's a soul. But once you get to the soul, then you're able to say, hey, I got a crack in the door here, man. Let's be honest, right? Once you start saying there's some things we don't know, then you can start looking at the evidence of the resurrection of the dead and the claims of Christianity. All right. I got 2 minutes. I want to do my little bit on justice real quick, because everybody's throwing around the word justice. Justice this side of this side of heaven will always be elusive. It's at best repayment or reparation or recompense or about 500 other RE words. But it can never, ever be true. And the reason why I think there's a God in this case is because you want it to be true. You want there to be justice in a way that the squirrels don't care. I don't think the squirrels care about justice. But we do. Why is that? Because like one of those things, that eternity is written on our heart. True justice, by the way, is wrapped up in God's righteousness and his forgiveness. In order for it to be truly right with people, there must be forgiveness, and I'll give you an example. All right, let's imagine I steal your car and I wreck your car. I owe you a new car. I can repay it. What if I steal your car and Grandma's in the front seat and I crash your car and Grandma dies? What do I owe you? I owe you a new car and a new Grandma. Can't put a price on Grandma. The insurance company will, but I can't. And even if I could miraculously resurrect Grandma, I cannot undo the psychological damage of me killing your grandma. I can't undo the psychological damage of stealing your car. I can't even undo the psychological damage of stealing a pack of gum from you. Do you see why it's elusive? There's one RE word that gets us there, and that's reconciliation. So there is, in our legal system, right, you pay a fine or whatever, the bell's going to go, but I'm going to go through it. You try to, repay something and try to make it right or whatever. But there is a chance where you can have reconciliation between victim and perpetrator. Imagine a 45-year-old woman with a 20-year-old son who gets gunned down in gang violence by another 20-year-old young man. And she's at the trial, and when she looks at that 20-year-old young man who killed her 20-year-old son in the witness box, she does not see a perpetrator, she sees her son. Yeah? She sees her son who was caught up in the same violent, sinful world. And she doesn't want any more judgment. She doesn't want any more law. She doesn't want another life lost. She just wants to go and hug the very man that killed her son. And so in our legal system, there's rare, but there's a moment where you can have reconciliation between victor and perpetrator. She knows the law has to do the law thing. She knows that he has to go to jail, but she forgives him. That's the only way that you can get true justice, where things can be just. Justice and righteousness are the same thing. The only way you can get to justice and righteous, is if it is a gift from above. Yeah? And love and forgiveness. And so add that to the list. Justice and righteousness, also things that you cannot do that only a God can do, and he gives you by faith. All right, I'm supposed to go to 240, correct? Yeah? I'm done?
Got 20 minutes of Q&A.
Okay, let's do it.
If we don't get to 20 minutes, you can still keep going if there's something else you want to talk about.
No, that's all right. What do you guys want to talk about? Anything? Yeah, have you run this by your neighbors?
Back to Simeon.
Is this going to be a, yeah? Okay, my man.
So in German class, we were talking about like the boat theory, like how many boards on a boat can you replace until it's a new boat?
Yeah.
Like, what's your thought on that?
How many parts of the boat do you replace when you're in? Okay. I'm going to take that seriously. All right. We were talking about accidents and essence, yes? Do you know what I mean? All right. All right. Now you're going to get, he thought he was smart. Now he's going to get a lesson. All right. The substance or essence of a thing is what makes the thing the thing. Accidents, not accident as like I ran into something, but accidents are like, think adjectives of a thing. So what's the substance of me, Mike Berg? Well, I would say a human male. What's accidental to me is my hair color, my eye color, my weight, my height. So the question becomes like, if I lose my thumb in a farm accident, I still have the essence of Mike Berg, right? But how many things do you chop off before I'm not that thing? Yeah? And I think, honestly, from this point of view, you can chop everything off, but I'm still going to be who I am because I am more, I'm a soul. And so I think this does help us in this discussion of the value of a human being, but also the existence of a supernatural. And what I mean by supernatural is above, beyond nature, this thing. Is that satisfactory enough for you? Okay. All right. Who else has got something? Question. Yeah, we got some over here.
When you talked about how like we don't live, like we realize we have like 80 years or something like that to live. Do you think that could be like a psychological remnant of when we used to live 200-300 years?
That's a good question. Perhaps, but I would suggest expand it to 300, 1,000, you're still limited, right? You're still limited. And I would imagine that even if you live 300 years, you would still want to live forever, right? So that's a really good question, but I think even if you extend it to 300 years, it's still limited, right? And I think we still think of ourselves as perpetually young, and we always think of the future. Maybe a different way to think about it is this. Have you ever thought about this? You've never had a moment in your life where you didn't think about, where you didn't have hope. And I don't mean necessarily hope as a positive thing, but you're always looking for tomorrow. You're always thinking, like, once I get through this next 20 minutes. Yeah, that's what you're thinking right now. Once I get through Monday, once I get through this week, once I get out of high school, once I get do this and whatever. You're always looking at your happiness and your existence in the past or the future. We always talk about being present, but you can't, because by the time you say, I'm in the present, I'm not in the present, I'm in the, right? I'm only moving. Here's what's so fascinating about heaven, and to your question, what I think that we naturally are like, man, that's where we want to be, in a way that the squirrels don't. At least we don't think they do. In heaven, is there hope? No, because it's already perfect in the moment, so there's nothing to hope for. Maybe you look forward to something, but there's no hope. Like it's going to be better. You've never had that moment, because you always think there can be something better. And a part of better would be living forever. So why do we constantly want something that's better? This is actually a really deep question. Why do you constantly want something that's better? I'm not sure that the squirrels contemplate that. The squirrels don't form unions and build and have homeowners associations and lie in the yard and look up to the sky and wonder what it would be like to go to the moon. But we did, and we did something about it. Why is that? Because I think we were created in the image of God. So I think it's all the same package. Is that fair?
Oh, on the sheet, like the note sheet, there's this part on page 5 that says like the probabilities of like one man fulfilling like all 8 prophecies in a row. I think it's 8, something like that. Like it's like 10 to the 70th, one out of 10 to the 70th power. I'm just wondering, like, where did that probability come from? Like, how do people calculate that?
Some book that I read. Like, if it's 1 out of 8, then that 1 out of 8, 1 out of 8, 1 out of 8, something like that. So you're going to have to ask your math teacher that. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. The point is like, the odds of this just happening by chance are just like, it's like somebody winning the lottery 4 times in a row. You're like, I think, no, I'm not sure, right? Like maybe twice. It has happened, but I don't know, man. Anybody else got something? I take your quietness as a compliment and not a criticism. Should I take it as a criticism? Or a compliment, yeah. All right. What's going on over here?
Got one over here.
I'm just speculating here. I'm not for sure. I think there are times when you can say, hey, this is an argument outside of Christianity from a philosophy. I think the key is to say, I can proclaim and explain, but if I'm on the defensive and if I am trying to help God's reputation, that's when I've gone too far. When I'm trying to polish up Jesus to make him look attractive, that's when I've gone too far. Is that a good answer? I think so. I'm going to take it. All right.
When did apologetics first become like a thing? Like when it was called apologetics?
Yeah. That's a good question. I think that in the history of the world, we thought differently than we do today. Today, we think in terms of assessments, data, outcomes. We're a very scientifically driven people. This is modernity, the modern world. But the ancient world was always thinking about what we call the liberal arts, truth, what was true, good, and beautiful. And so the natural apologetic thing was sort of just understood. And often it was given a different name called rhetoric. So like even up into the 1800s, there was only one class that was required at Harvard University. You could pick any class you wanted, didn't matter what you could. There was only one required class, and that was rhetoric. It was how to speak and how to make an argument. So you're always doing that. I think the modern apologetics, which is like defending itself from attacks from a non-spiritual or secular world, is probably 1800s. But the early church, when they did apologetics, it was usually in defense against other religions. So they would include apologetics as defending themselves against other religions because everybody was religious back then. So, or against Greek philosophy. So probably the earliest would be like in the 2nd century AD. But the modern term, I would guess 1700s, 1800s. All right. I totally made most of that up.
In today's society in America, Islam is a pretty vastly growing religion.
Mm-hmm.
They deny the crucifixion, as you know. Their argument for that is that the Bible describes Jesus being beaten beyond recognition, so that on the cross, they argue that how do you know it was Jesus if it was beaten beyond recognition?
Yeah. So, if the Roman soldiers were, if they did not do their job of killing the right person and killing the person, they would sometimes face death themselves. The Romans are very good at killing people and torturing people. And to think that they would mix up the bodies, I think you got to be like, that's a conspiracy theory that's coming from way deep, you know. By the way, Islam's a baby religion, 600 years after Christianity. And you only have one guy who speaks, and actually doesn't speak. Does speak, but like it's direct revelation from God, not like an interpretation or whatever. You have to take his word for it instead of multiple people seeing the testimony. And so I think you weigh it out. You go like, dude, like even the enemies of Christ were like, yeah, he died. Right? Like, how do you have to look at the evidence, man, and come on. I think would be my argument. By the way, Islam, what's really important to Islam is Christmas. It's the incarnation. Because God becoming man, it's all about the sovereignty and the power of God. So God becoming man, let alone dying, that's abhorrent to them. I was at a hospital in Minnesota once, and I'm wearing my clericals. This is why I wear those, because there's opportunities left and right to do evangelism. And this young Muslim man, I won't tell you the context, but it's neither here nor there, but comes up to me, and I only had like 30 seconds with him. And he asked me, he's like, how could you say that Mary is the mother of God? And I knew what he was after. Because he didn't think that, how could you have a God that would lower himself? I knew what he was after because I had that training. And so my apology to him at that moment was like, that's the whole point. It's love. It's not power, it's love. He used his power for love. By the way, the incarnation, the fact that he saw it as a lowing of God, which is true, missed something that I think is quite profound. I think it's the greatest miracle of all time. Because it's the infinite God in a finite body. How do you do that? That's the greatest miracle of all time. And he uses power for love. Yeah, good stuff. I got 5 minutes. Can I just do a bit real quick? Think about different religions since you brought it up. The whole thing with different religions is, I think you need to think about it differently. We're using a Western term religion to categorize an ancient phenomenon. We're stuck with the word religion, and when people say all religions are the same, that's offensive to all religions, and it is taking Western categories and shoehorning them into categories that don't exist for them. 100 years ago, if you went to India and you said, my religion is Christian, your religion is Hinduism, they would be like, what do you mean religion? What do you mean Hinduism? For them, it's just a way of life. So we're stuck with the word religion, but don't fall into the trap of thinking that this is apples to apples. It's apples to oranges. Yeah? So there's 4 types of religions. You have the primitive religions. Every culture has them. And what's common to all of them is that you have a God who is somehow located, either located in space or like a geographical on the ground kind of thing. And the goal of all of these religions, despite all of their diversity, is to manipulate the spiritual realm, because they knew that there was a spiritual realm, and you're manipulating it for your own benefit, whether it be voodoo doll, making sacrifices, burying your ancestors with things to make them happy, burial mounds. All it was living in fear of the spiritual realm, and you're trying to manipulate it for your own benefit. That's really what it finally comes down to. The second type of religion comes from the subcontinent of India. Starts with Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism. All right. What's common to all of them is they're not really religions as they are ways of life. And the way of life here, what's unique to those sets, but similar in those 4 religions, is that the body is bad and you want to try to get out of the body. By the way, God does not speak. You can have many gods, you can have no God. That's not the point. They don't have doctrine. It's just a way of life to get yourself out of the cycle of samsara to moksha, which is the place of being and non-being. So the body's bad, I want to get out of there. By the way, my apology to them would be but the body's good, and start there. Then you have the so-called Eastern religions, were really more philosophies than anything else. You have Taoism and Confucianism. They're both asking the same question: how do I find harmony? The Taoists say, go out into nature. So Lao Tzu, their leader, their founder, said, I need to find harmony, and it's away from the dirty city. And so he just walked into the forest and never came back. Before he left, he wrote down his teaching. And maybe he found harmony, maybe he got eaten by a bear, we don't know. Confucius said the opposite. He said, Lao Tzu, you're ridiculous. You don't go out into nature, you go into society to find harmony, and this is found by property. So all of the rules of, like, here's the emperor, here's the person, what are the relationships? These are more philosophies. But because they speak about God, because everybody spoke about God back then, or the gods, we categorize it as religions, but it's not. Shinto's its own thing. Then you have the fourth kind, which is the Western religions: Judaism, Christianity, Islam. You can throw in Zoroastrianism in there. By the way, most famous Zoroastrian. Anybody? 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 Freddie Mercury. Huh. All right. Okay. Here's what's different about Western monotheism. It's not just that there's one God. It's that God speaks. God didn't speak in any of those other ones. So now I have doctrine that I can compare. Now I can say to my Jewish friend, hey, what about the prophecies? To my Islamic friend, what about the incarnation and the crucifixion? But I dare not just say all of these religions are the same. And when you start thinking about that, you'll start thinking apologetically, and if you have the opportunity to speak, you'll be better off for it. Thank you for having me. Yeah? All right, I'm done.
Thank you again, Dr. Berg, for being here today and sharing your presentation with us. I can say, from having sat in the back of the room, I looked around and the entire group was locked in pretty much the whole time. So thank you for your attention, for taking good things away from this, and thank you for keeping us engaged with your presentation. A lot of things we can put into practice. I'm going to say we've got a half hour at the end for your last breakout group session. It's about 3 o'clock right now. Let's give you 5 minutes to stand, to stretch, to use the bathroom. And then by 3:05, let's say, be back in the classroom that you were in for the last breakout group. We'll have one last chance to discuss those final questions. And then at 3:30, your day is done, and you can go on with the rest of things. So 5 minutes to stretch, take a break, and then be at your rooms at 3:05 for the last breakout group.
Good to see you, man. Good to see you. Yeah.